Okay, good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Woodbury County Zoning Commission. Today's date is September 25th, 2023, and the time is 5:04. Tonight's meeting will be audio taped and minutes will be prepared. In respect to all parties, we ask those present turn off cell phones or set to vibrate. Those in attendance are asked to legibly complete the attendance sheet upon the front table. I would like to take a few moments to review the procedures that the commission will follow tonight. First, the commission will handle the normal housekeeping agenda items. Then for each application on the agenda, I will open the public hearing on the item. The planning and zoning staff will then present the staff report, including the staff recommendations. Any letters or other communication received from the public prior to the hearing will be entered into the record. The applicant will then have the opportunity to present his or her case and respond to the staff report. Next, we will hear comments from the public. If you would like to speak either in support of or against the application, you must come to the microphone. Please first state your name and address for the record. All interested parties shall be heard, but repetitious comments should be avoided. Repetitious or irrelevant comments may be ruled out of order by the chair, and I ask that you remain respectful and courteous with your comments at all times. We will limit those comments to 3 minutes tonight, as we have quite a few things on the agenda. After all public comments have been heard, the staff and applicant may make a closing statement. The hearing shall then be closed by motion and vote. Thereafter, no further comments from the staff, public, or applicant may be heard unless asked for by the commission. The commission shall then deliberate the case and may ask questions of the applicant, the staff, or any party offering testimony. However, such questions do not reopen the hearing for additional comments from the public unless so requested or approved by the commission. The commission will then formulate and vote on a motion. The motion will typically either grant or deny the requested application. Any commission member who has an ex parte communication to place in the record of this meeting should do so prior to the beginning of the deliberation of their respective agenda items. With that being said, it's called to order. The roll call is, let the record reflect that all commissioners are here tonight. The third item on the agenda is public comment on matters not on this agenda. Do we have any public comment not on this agenda? Okay, seeing none or hearing none, we're going to go on to the approval of the minutes of September 11th of 2023. We have no additions or deletions, corrections. I entertain a motion to approve.
A motion to approve.
We have a motion. Can I get a second, please?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motions, the minutes have been approved for September 11th. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing for Townley Edition minor subdivision proposal on parcel. Dan, take her away.
Yes, Donald J. Townley, in his capacity as trustee of the Darrell J. Townley Revocable Trust, has filed for a one-lot minor subdivision on the property identified as parcel number 894607100007. This subdivision is being completed to separate the house from the abutting ground. The proposal has been properly noticed in Sioux City Journal's legal section on September 14, 2023. The neighbors within 1,000 feet have been duly notified via September 11th letter about tonight's zoning commission public hearing. Appropriate stakeholders, including government agencies, utilities, and organizations, have been notified and requested to comment. The Woodbury County engineer found the proposal in compliance with Iowa code closure requirements and found that the lots have adequate access. He has also recommended an easement agreement that was also included subsequently in the packet. This property is located in the Agricultural Preservation Zoning District, and it is located in the Special Flood Hazard Area Zone A. The city of Sioux City has conducted their extraterritorial review of the acceptance and approval of the final plat with a city resolution. The area is less than 5 acres and a base flood elevation data is not required to be submitted. Based on the information and requirements set forth, staff recommends approval of the proposal.
Okay, do we have anyone here that's representing Townley Edition tonight?
I'm Alan Fagan. I'm the surveyor rep. I'm here for the property owner. I have nothing further to add than what Dan said.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anyone else from the public? Commissioners have any questions?
Included easement.
Closed session? Or
Close the public hearing.
close the public hearing, sorry.
Make motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
I'll just make a motion to recommend the approval to the Board of Supervisors as proposed.
I'll second.
And then the second to approve the application. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay. Passed unanimously. Ready for the next item?
Yeah.
Okay. Review of conditional use permit for application proposed telecommunication tower at 120 feet monopole on parcel number 8743163000005. Dan?
Yes, this conditional use permit review, AMG Technology Investment Group, doing business as NextLink, has filed a conditional use permit application to request to install a 120-foot monopole communication tower to supply high-speed internet to the surrounding areas on the property designated as parcel number 8743163000005. The proposed location is around 2.5 miles south of Anthon and about 4.2 miles northeast of Odo. The proposal has been properly noticed in the Sioux City Journal's legal section since September 14th. The neighbors within 1 mile were duly notified via a September 13th letter about the Board of Adjustments public hearing on October 2nd. Appropriate stakeholders, including government agencies, utilities, organizations, have been requested to comment. The property is located in the Agricultural Preservation Zoning District. Based on the information received and the requirements set forth in the zoning ordinance, as well as review of the site plan, the proposal meets the appropriate criteria for approval, and it's the recommendation of staff to recommend approval.
Do we have anyone here for the, represents this application? Come on up.
In this location, the site is a place of holding testing, deli. If you guys have any questions or no, it'll serve up to a 6 mile range, so close to 600 plus people. They run a big feedlot there, so they definitely need our support. Free internet, other rentals.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else from the public that wants to speak to this application? Okay. Seeing no one or hearing no one? Are you ready to close the public hearing again?
It would just be voting on.
Oh, sorry, that's right. Yep, we're just voting.
Dan, do we have anyone on the phone?
Yes, we have 3 individuals on the phone.
Nothing regarding this then?
It appears we have 3 individuals on the phone. Are you here to, for the telecommunication tower or a different agenda item?
Equipment. I recommend this to approve this proposal.
I second that motion.
Yes.
And yes, I'll second that.
Agenda. The public hearing for solar energy utility scale, public hearing solar energy utility scale solar systems, consideration of solar ordinance for recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Dan, you want to lead us in this?
Yes, just to kind of follow up from the last meeting in Moville, of course, the zoning commission has received direction by the Board of Supervisors to look at the possibility of crafting a utility scale solar ordinance to look at a process for permitting these items out in rural Woodbury County, in particular, making them possibly available on agricultural land. At the time, the supervisors offered a set of items, which I will read off again. They're looking at a conditional use permit for AP with planning and zoning and Board of Adjustment to be able to cite specifically, take into consideration the concerns of neighbors, land and soil, and other factors when approving a permit. A slope of no more than 5% in order to preserve land and to account for soil erosion, compaction, and future land stewardship. A maximum height of no more than 20 feet for panel structures. Of all AP, no more than 49% could be used as such in such a project. In short, 51% must be for agricultural production or no longer considered AP. Utility scale can be no more than 2% of all AP agricultural preservation, preserving 98% of AP. This equates to approximately 8,540 acres of the 427,000 acres of ag land, constituting 75% of 570,000 total acres in Woodbury County. Current notification for utility scale shall be 1 mile for public comment instead of 500 feet. Then a requirement or at least strong consideration that the utility scale solar project be either on a landowner's property or that the owner of land be a resident of Woodbury County. Okay, in addition to this is kind of getting ahead a little bit, but I see on the board agenda for tomorrow night on the 26th, the supervisors, again, this isn't something that's a directive at this point because they haven't discussed this yet, but it's out on public notice of their meeting that to have the board continue to consider the conditional use for the site specific. Then they talk about a slope of no more than 5% only for fixed arrays. Most technology is now movable arrays. They put in parentheses in order to preserve the land and to account for soil erosion, compaction, and future land stewardship. Then not more than 1% of industrial land conversion every 4 years for reclassification to 5,700 acres. Current notification again would be the 1 mile as referenced, and they add a decommissioning plan for solar companies reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustment, subject to approval by the supervisors. Again, this item will be discussed for the board agenda tomorrow night. I do want to point out, I'm going to kind of have a PowerPoint there behind us a bit to kind of talk about the essence of the meeting outline. When I get done kind of opening this up, we will want to turn it over to the citizen concerns. And as the chair had mentioned, we ask that you go 3 minutes at a time as far as delivering of the comments. Then subsequent to the public discussion, we'll kind of talk a bit about concepts that are going to be a part of any potential ordinance, and that would be what the appropriate locations are, what the appropriate zoning districts are. Decisions would have to be made on the type of ordinance, the formats in which we use the ordinance to direct the permitting process, which would include the process type. We would also have to look at the information. What are the things that we need to know from the applicants and landowners about the respective systems being proposed for a particular area, and the requirements of permitting a utility scale solar utility system. And of course, with any ordinance, we need definitions, a way to define the concepts in which the county would in particular choose to regulate. I would jump back to the appropriate locations. I would discuss this a bit further as we continue to look at this, and of course, information that we have learned with Moville out at Moville. Of course, all those items delivered to us, we glean it and look into it to see how it can be applied into a potential ordinance proposal. And the goal again tonight is to collect that information in the hopes of putting together a particular ordinance recommendation or a proposal that would ultimately be debated and looked at for all of us to see as a potential possibility. As far as locations, we typically in zoning talk about zoning districts. We know the major unit of analysis right now is the agricultural preservation zoning district, which constitutes much of the land out in Woodbury County. The current permitting process does facilitate for a conditional use permit opportunity in the general industrial zoning districts, but the discussion of a particular ordinance now is what can we find to be appropriate or not appropriate as far as the regulation of these in agricultural land. And as the Board of Supervisors direction points to, there's several considerations for the Zoning Commission to look at as far as what the ground rules are for placement of these items on ag land. Looking at various other jurisdictions out there, which we have looked at and have included in the backup materials, of course, for the Moville meeting, there's a series of counties, a series of ordinances that have been crafted. And we all know that each and every county is unique. The makeup is unique. And so the goal is to learn from those, to develop something very unique to Woodbury County. And some concepts that we may very well look at considering is possibly the concept of an overlay district versus a straight conditional use. An overlay district is a possibility to create a zoning designation that sits on top of a specific zoning district, which would ultimately require a rezoning procedure similar to what we do today as far as zoning commission looking at a particular area and seeing whether or not it could be appropriate for a respective rezone. There's counties out there such as Lynn County and Scott County that use this type of setup as far as scrutinizing a particular area to see if it meets ordinance specific requirements. And some of these ordinances in particular look at your corn suitability rating or various other determining factors to see whether or not a particular zone is appropriate. Inside of an overlay district, what an overlay district typically would function as, it would keep the essence of agriculture as the underlying zoning district, but it could open up a particular use based upon scrutiny of the rezone. There is a chance in looking at requirements within these ordinances to set up a situation, whether it would be decommissioning or agricultural restoration plans or various other steps that could be to return land back to the controlling use of what the base district is. The reason we bring that up is in the rezone process that we have now, we frequently talk about the concept of spot zoning, which is not permissible as far as creating island zoning districts with different uses. The county decision-making is typically controlled by the county development plan, and the development plan has a map called the future land use map, which controls the priorities and the direction of land use out within the county. The use of an overlay district allows a bit more flexibility as far as the consideration for placement in different areas. Examples of overlay districts, which we currently have one in the zoning ordinance, which is a conservation zoning district where zoning commission and the board of supervisors could consider areas to be deemed conservation areas by way of a rezone overlay district. So I just kind of wanted to point out a few of those respective concepts before we turn it over for public comments. So that's what all I have at this point.
Do we have anyone here that wants to comment on our investigation here as to what to do next? What to be included in our ordinances? Or not, for that matter.
Yeah, this is Matt Countryman from Renewable Energy Equity Partners. Can you all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I think mitigation plans and ag restoration plans, that's a good path forward when applicants are seeking a conditional use permit with an overlay district. Something that can be incorporated into a lot of development applications regarding utility scale solar energy parks.
Thank you. Yeah. I think there's a button. There you go. Let's see.
Deb Harpenoff from Salix. Throughout our daily lives, we see change. Usually it's gradual and it's not even noticeable. So it's just accepted or even expected. For the last decade or more, people started addressing climate change and as a result started researching alternative energy sources, one of which is solar. And again, this change, in fact, is a sudden change. I understand for some, this can be scary, but we can find solutions. We should listen to the facts, such as native grasses will be planted under the panels. This land used to be all native grasses before it was broken up for agriculture. These native grasses will be home to many species of wildlife, while the grasses rejuvenate the soil through its roots and water absorption and retention. There has been rumors that NEOL 3 and 4 will scale back or possibly shut down in the future. If that would happen, I think utility solar would be a clean, non-toxic, and economical source of electrical generation.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello. Wally Wagner. If we went back 87 years ago, my grandfather bought a farm on the river, which is located just north of Neal South. And then later on, another parcel to the east. Now, my folks bought a parcel that actually adjoins Neal South to the east. And, you know, we were there before Neal South was. So Deb had just talked about progress or change. I don't think there's anybody in this room that saw more change in their neck of the woods right at their home than we did. I was a teenager when that all started happening. Besides the fact that the Corps of Engineers completely rerouted the river. We had land that adjoined the river. And then after that, our hunting and fishing ground was, you know, changed completely. So anyway, we're talking about change. We're really talking about progress. So I have parcels east of Salix. I have parcels west of Salix, grew up out there. And I have parcels south of the airport in the general industrial zone. And we have had at least 8, probably 10 different companies contact us for options on these parcels all over, okay, in all 3 of the areas. So with the present interest in renewable energy, it's my conclusion that it's coming to our area, okay? And the Salix area is prime for solar electrical generation due to the proximity to the Neal complex and the electrical grid that is there. Okay. So to me, it's like we're either going to accommodate it or we could put our heads down and butt at it, but it's probably not going to work. Okay. As my mom would say, we could be bullheaded about it. Okay. So the conclusion is, like it was 50 years ago, electrical generation is important. Okay. We're talking about millions of people being served with electricity. Now, at present, it's with renewable energy. So to me, lower production land, which I have some of that, okay, would be an appropriate consideration for you all. And also the lower residential density, okay? So now going back to the CSR1, CSR2s, you guys heard about that last session. The CSR2s are not accurate for what I refer to as gumbo, okay? Poorly drained, high clay density soils, okay? And so it's like they went 2 to 1. So I don't know that that is a really accurate consideration for you guys to think about in the future. Okay.
Wally, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that was your 3 minutes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you for your comments, though. I appreciate it. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Jared Ullery. I am the owner of UR Energy. I was present here, I think about 3 months ago, submitting a special use permit for a data center. So my company builds data centers all over Iowa. We have about 250 megawatts in our pipeline currently. And one of our 5 megawatt projects is in the vicinity of these solar projects and wind projects that are going on. So we support it. I'm here to support it. I'm not a local resident. I'm in LeGrand, Iowa, but we have many sites in this area and we plan on developing those sites as well. So I plan on seeing you guys many more times. So thanks for having me.
Anyone else?
Kevin Lons from Salix. I just want to, I've heard the talk about progress and a lot about renewable energies. I'd just like to first just challenge the assertion that the use of solar on land, agricultural land in Iowa meets the definition of agricultural preservation, right? It's not an agricultural use, and I think it's kind of a stretch. Seems like quite a stretch to call it an accommodation that this is something that's compatible with agriculture. It's obviously going to supplant agriculture, and you can argue whether it can be put back at a later time, but that's really a secondary issue. Obviously, solar is being considered along with some of the other renewable energies because they're being heavily subsidized. As I think everybody here recognizes, we wouldn't have this discussion if there wasn't a significant federal subsidy for this process. I'm not sure that, well, first off, I think everybody also recognizes that those subsidies are being paid for with debt, not with revenue, and they certainly aren't going to pay for themselves. So the energy being produced is not a sustainable process, even though that's the way we tend to describe it. I know that there is consideration, and it's maybe outside of the purview specifically for this discussion, but about how much revenue might be increased for either the individuals who the landowner, but more specifically for the county. But I really wonder what the net effect will be for the county, for how much revenue comes into the local area, how much revenue is generated, and how much is lost because of the changes now money is spent in the county. Because I'm sure most of these, I would assume that the entities that are going to bring this into the county are not local. So their considerations aren't really for any of those things. It's about chasing short-term profit coming from federal subsidy. So I probably about run out of time, but I mean, just as a fundamental, solar is a very inefficient way of producing power, and it's hard to imagine that it could ever produce anywhere close to the amount of money that is being promised, again, through subsidies. So I feel like that is a short-term bet, something that is certainly not assured long-term. And I really question how long into a 40-year contract that apparently they're discussing they could actually be relied upon. So I live down in Salix, I live in the area, and I'm not sure they would be at your shop, but we're talking about large projects that could have a very large impact on property values. So just some things that I would like to see considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Rebecca Murr. I live in Sioux City. First of all, I feel that people should think about this a little bit more. I believe solar farms are a misnomer totally because energy is not an ag product. The definition of farm is an area of land and buildings used for growing crops and raising animals. At the last meeting, the proponents of these solar zones talked about planting grasses and trees to increase the land value and protect wildlife, but they were presented as ideas and not requirements. So I guess that would be one of my main concerns. Also, are there fees if these solar panels break down? Who pays for those? Who checks on them to see the maintenance is maintained? And what happens to those, and whose cost is it after they don't function anymore? We still have unsightly satellite dishes around the county too. They talked also about taxes generated. Would they be staying in Woodbury County from these solar areas? I do feel that there's plenty of unused commercial properties where these could be implemented to benefit a larger number of people, or the units could be directly connected to produce energy that they claim there's so much of directly to an item that needs that energy instead of taking up cropland or animal land. And I do feel that these do disrupt wildlife areas. So I am against this. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Inez, Salix, Iowa. First of all, thank you for this opportunity, and We believe God has appointed all of you guys in this position, and we pray that you make good decisions in everything that you're involved in. Apart from our United States Constitution, which I am grateful for, the Bible is the first to uphold the right of owning and being able to use private property. The latter informed the authors of our Constitution and is evidence in the language therein. 2 of the 10 commandments say, "Thou shalt not steal," and "Thou shalt not covet." These imply and entail the right to work hard and the right to own or possess, including the right of private property. Part of the issue with the situation is not simply the thought or idea that a person should be able to do with their property as they please, but rather that it is that in this liberty and reality, one is still responsible for the stewardship of the land that God ultimately owns and the neighbor that lives beyond one's boundary. As an example, Exodus 21:20-29 says, "If an ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be acquitted. But if the ox tended to thrust with his horn in times past, and has been made known to his owner, and he has not kept it confined, so that it has killed a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death." As you may see, God's law informs us that the way we manage our private property matters in more than just our personal benefit. It also matters as how it affects others, quite weighty. And this is just one example. There are many angles we can take and should consider, you guys ourselves. Here are a few. Subsidies. All this money is given for this. Where does it come from? And who's going to pay for it? And maybe even who actually owns this. Land depletion. We don't have more farmland than what we possess now. There's contaminant effects. Jobs and economy. Outside entities are paid for this project, and other non-Iowa residents hired will benefit most, apart from maybe only a few local hired individuals in the long run. This is historically the case. Neighbors. Those who have invested in living in the area have the right to expect present zoning to be honored so that their own investments are not diminished due to change. In closing, Dr. Gordon Wilson, Senior Fellow of Natural History of the New St. Andrews College, in response to this complex issue, states, "It's true that once operational wind energy cuts emissions by running on 100% renewable resource, but is that the whole story? Wind turbines and solar panels, along with the batteries required to store the energy, have a high monetary environmental production cost. These upfront costs may balance out over time with low operating costs, but for now, the power that the wind and solar farms provide is more expensive than the traditional power. This cost demands government subsidies that are likely greater than the reduced energy costs of the wind and solar farms. Additionally, wind and solar farms require vast areas of land that can change the natural aesthetics and landscape and interfere with wildlife habitats. Bats and birds are often killed by the rotating blades or the concentrated beams of light, and the turbine vibrations produce sound pollution. With complex environmental topics such as alternative energy, we must carefully consider the impact on our neighbors and God's creation as we make wise dominion decisions." Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
Again, I'm Elizabeth Widman from Sergeant Bluff, and I'm a landowner in Woodbury County, and my sons are 5th generation Woodbury County farmers. And what I would just like to address, there's seems to be a misconception about constitutional rights and property rights, and that you cannot restrict a property owner from doing anything they want to on their property. And if the situation was reversed and incorporated city land, had a C put on it to allow ag activities in the city, so that someone could put a hog building on their property in town if they had enough property to do it. And someone else maybe want a couple cows and a flock of chickens in there, and say, well, the neighbors just have to put up with the flies and the noise and the smell. No one would be in favor of that. So I don't think it's right to come out to ag protected properties and say, we're going to put a C on here, and you just have to put up with, when they put up these solar facilities, it is not ag land. It is not Um, it is not the life out in the country that people want out there. It can, if you put these up, it can lower property values. You have noise from these solar panels. There's glare, there's a loss of beautiful viewage. There's harm to wildlife and birds. There's 12,860,000 solar panels that'll be no good in 10 years or less. If you have hailstorms, we're gonna have to do something with those. They're gonna be in our county. And we could possibly have a change in administration here with elections coming up, and there might not, these solar panels might not be so subsidized. I read somewhere environmentalists are actually asking in some areas to quit putting up so many solar panels because it kills the birds. The extreme heat from the reflective material can instantly incinerate them. It changes the migratory patterns, especially down by Salix. You know, you have birds come through on my property. I have a pond. We have the geese come through. And the biggest treasure in Woodbury County is our people that live out in the county. My children have been involved in 4-H. We go to the fair. You know, if you put these solar facilities in there, people are not going to view this as the beautiful ag land that they've lived in. These are industrial. They're not solars at my time. And so thank you for listening, your consideration. And I just ask you to, you know, preserve this for the people that love the land and want to live out in the country.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good afternoon. Thanks for all the work you people have done. Leo Yoakum, Salix, Iowa. About 10 days ago, my wife and I took off and went to Indiana to see relatives. At the Quad Cities, we got off the interstate, took the back roads through Illinois. Those county roads are all blacktop, but they're very narrow. As we were enjoying the landscape, we came upon a utility solar facility. Actually, when we saw that, we were only about a quarter of a mile away. That's when we noticed it. We went along it for about a mile and then we pulled over and stopped. As we got out of the car, pheasants flew out of the pollinator area, out of those grasses that were inside the perimeter fence. We took some time just looking around and listening. There wasn't any electrical hum like you hear in electrical lines. There was no sound of motors. But what we did hear was crickets. We could hear the crickets chirping. The grasses under the panels were very green. They were probably mowed within the last couple of weeks. The pollinators between the panels and the fences, they were green and flowering. As we drove away, we noticed some acreages. A few across the road used the vegetative covers that's always supplied free of charge by the solar companies. There were a couple of acreages on the same side of the facility that had a windbreak. That was probably in place before the solar facility was built. We were impressed with how professional everything looked. There wasn't any machinery parked outside. We did not see any trash. We didn't see any piles of used panels anywhere. Actually, I wasn't surprised to see how neat everything looked. The other facilities that I have been at look just as good. If utility solar is allowed in Woodbury County, I would employ the same practice today that I used in the mid-70s. In 1974, we built a new house on our farm. In 1978, I expanded my hog operation by building a confinement facility. The concerns of the neighbors were satisfied when I built it approximately 400 feet from my house. If utility solar becomes a reality, I would allow panels 360 degrees around my house, if the pipeline easement allows it. Thank you. I do have some handouts for you that I missed the deadline on. Madam Chair, can you accept them?
Your motion to receive it.
Okay, we need a motion to receive.
Move to receive.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you.
It's actually just comparables from what was mentioned last week. It can be included in the packet for next week or whatever, so.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
My name's Ian Johnston. I live in Salix, out in the country. I thought the only mortal sin anymore was not recycling, leaving a bigger footprint. I understand these solar panels are not recyclable. So what are we leaving for our kids and our grandkids? My second point is parts of these solar panels are made by the Ungars, slave labor in communist China. The women and the children are physically and sexually abused. I don't want any part of that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once, going twice.
If I may, sorry, I was gonna wait to chime in, but this is Will Doherty with Mid-American Energy. Is it okay if I give a quick comment?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so I guess there's a lot of good comments, I think, overall from the meeting. A lot to kind of unpack, but I'll just kind of keep it short and simple. You know, our position on it from the zoning perspective is, you know, there's a lot of good ways that a lot of these concerns can potentially be mitigated, and I think through a permit process and a public hearing process. Any constituents that, you know, live in adjacent proposed projects would be able to have their case heard, and the conditional use can directly reflect any of those concerns for mitigation side of things. But kind of in line with what we were discussing last week, with the land use for ag lands and potential for solar to be placed on them. I think having a thorough decommissioning plan in place, that's something that's required throughout a lot of counties throughout the state, something that gets reviewed and approved by both the counties and the proposed solar developers. So that's a mechanism that the county can try to utilize to mitigate any future impacts to the ag land and restore the property back to its original use after the decommissioning of the project. Additionally, you can look at things such as visual screening or shielding from projects. A lot of times these projects, if they are located in ag properties, they are surrounded by adjacent ag parcels as well. Having buffers, you know, whether that be a setback from road right-of-ways or from fence lines, allows for those visual screenings to take place once the vegetation is established. So having a plan on the front end of a project that a developer or a project owner must enter into with a county is a good way to try to mitigate that as well. Establishes vegetation growth plans, seeding mixes, stuff like that. Kind of lays out on the front end the expectations from the county side of things for the maintenance of it and the growth of it long-term for the project. Overall, I think for the general comments that we've received on solar, it is an above all approach from Mid-American's point of view. I think someone pointed out earlier, you know, Neil is located down in Salix area. Someone else had pointed out that, you know, they didn't believe that solar was a viable option. As we look toward transitioning from a more carbon intensive resource to more diverse resources, it is an all the above approach. There is no one size fits all. There is no silver bullet. It can't all be wind. It can't all be solar. So having the resources available to help hedge and mitigate any potential fluctuations in market prices, whether it be from natural gas or coal, or material costs from wind or solar. Having all those resources available is in the best interest of not only the utility customers, but also the state in general, having more balanced portfolio and really starting to kind of hedge your resources so that you don't become too heavy or too reliant on one. So that being said, I'm always open for questions or comments. We can always try to get a tour for anybody down at Neil Solar as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do the countdown again. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. We're going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and then you get to present, correct?
You could either leave it open until I'm done.
Oh.
or However.
Okay, we'll leave it and we'll leave the public hearing open. Okay, Dan, it's your turn.
Hey. Okay, a few things that I want to go through is obviously this is an intricate issue with a lot of components, lots of topics that were already delivered here tonight. And what I kind of want to do is kind of look at an outer shell or some type of concepts that can be considered in addition to what has been kind of directed to us by the supervisors, and just kind of want to show a photo. This is actually a picture of the Mid-American site down there on Port Neal Road, just to simply show you one aspect of how some of the panels might look. That's just a small sample of an area within the respective property, just putting that out there for informational purposes, just so that we can see what some panels look like. I know that there was some references to agriculture and the possible coexistence of this as far as agricultural land. And there is a topic out there, which agri-solar or agrivoltaics, which is referenced. It's quite in its early stages, but there are some concepts from overseas where these respective concepts could coexist. Here's a kind of a fascinating image from that was sent over to me last week, showing the coexistence of a wheat field and agriculture, where the panels are actually on the sides there of the combines as far as a operation. This is actually from a German respective website, kind of demonstrating, at least from the grounds of wheat, showing that relationship. And again, I'm just putting that out there for informational purposes. But the meeting is kind of organized into these general type of topics. I touched on this a bit earlier as far as the appropriate location. And this debate really comes down to where are the appropriate areas to place these systems in Woodbury County. I know there's been references in the past that that's facilitated through the conditional use permit process as you analyze the respective characteristics of a neighborhood, contact the owners within so many feet. But there's a number of ways to look at the locations on what is appropriate. So obviously our zoning district is the top item that we use to control land use. What's appropriate in some zoning districts, as we know, is not appropriate in other zoning districts. So yes, the debate is what's appropriate in agricultural preservation. Many of the ordinances that are out there across the state do look at the consideration of the corn suitability rating. We've of course received comments, and it's very clear that there is a discrepancy between corn suitability rating 1 and corn suitability rating 2, as both figures will generate different results. And I believe the key part is moisture that is not factored in between the two, which result in different numbers. However, corn suitability 2 is the primary one that is used for assessment purposes. But corn suitability rating 2 is an item that is looked at in places such as Scott County to decide if an area is not appropriate or appropriate for taking some farmland out of production. Agricultural related uses is definitely a topic that we'll have to be looking at as far as any respective proposal. As far as whether it's a conditional use permit, whether it's a overlay district proposal. As we've received direction on looking at the 5% slope, anything under 5% may be more appropriate than not. It just depends on what we find through the process moving forward. Maybe the possibility, if we're looking at ag land, to look at the total amount of acres and consider some type of cap or some limitation as far as an allotment that might be available out there on agricultural land. We also received direction on looking at possibly a 20-foot height cap. We can also look at controlling density as far as separation distances or setbacks or the appropriateness of how far it is from a residential area, from an airport or various other areas of concern. The notification area, how far should someone live from a project area in order to get a letter to be notified about it? Traditionally, our conditional use permit process is set up for a few levels of notification. Typically, it's 500 feet for a standard conditional use. However, as you saw tonight with the tower, that was 1 mile. And so 1 mile could be a possibility as far as notifying property owners from any type of site. The other aspect that we'll have to look at is the overall framework like is done in the conditional use. The site considerations, what are the uniqueness characteristics of the property itself and the abutting property around the area and the local community in which these are proposed to be placed in. We have a set of criteria now with the conditional use where the Zoning Commission and the Board of Adjustment heavily scrutinize whether something is appropriate or not. As far as this ordinance and looking at a respective ordinance, it would be added features to the conditional use process if that is something that would likely be part of the consideration process. Kind of moving to the topic number 3 here, the question is, do you do a standalone ordinance or an ordinance amendment? The difference between the standalone and the ordinance amendment is a standalone is how the wind ordinance came about. A standalone is an ordinance that does not necessarily involve zoning. It involves looking at an application and ultimately taking the application directly to the Board of Supervisors, which is pretty much the design. The difference with an ordinance amendment to the zoning is we retain the districts and the lines of demarcation as far as general industrial, agricultural preservation, suburban residential. We keep those lines as far as the areas of the county divided. And so looking at the zoning ordinance looks at all the tools that the county has at its disposal as far as looking at appropriate areas, looking at setbacks, separation distances, as well as involving the Zoning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Supervisors in a partnership plan in terms of considering respective proposals. The next topic to bring to your attention is right now. Let's just look at what we have on the books right now. Somebody, let's just say, approaches Woodbury County and they have a parcel that's out on agricultural land. We would look at it and we would tell them that it's not appropriate in the agricultural preservation district because of the way the current zoning is. And so the property owner, the applicant would have two choices. They could attempt to apply for a zoning ordinance map amendment rezone to the available district, which is general industrial. However, in the field of zoning, as was referenced before, we have a definition in the ordinance called spot zoning, where we do not create individual, oftentimes we'll call them island districts that are not associated with the use or the district directly abutting them. That ends up being a situation with the development plan and the mapping as a whole, we could run into where, okay, it's not appropriate for that area based on the current mapping. It's not appropriate because it's a respective spot zone. Therefore, under the current process, there definitely is not a route, except for if the available general industrial is found. The other option that I did touch on at the very beginning of the meeting is the concept of the overlay district. And what the concept of the overlay district is looking at that as part of instituting an ordinance based upon the appropriateness of an area to rezone to based on specific regulations. So what do I mean by that? Well, we have different things that we had talked about, whether it's corn suitability rating, whether it's slope, and the various other items that could be associated with a rezone effort. In other words, if somebody were to say, yes, I would like to rezone to an overlay district for a respective solar project. Well, it could be considered within a solar overlay district to institute characteristics of the area that would be considered as part of that approval process in order to switch over to an overlay district. Again, overlay means it sits on top of an existing use for the time period in which it is authorized. As far as doing that, you could have the zoning commission review the process thoroughly based upon a set of standards. Those standards could be scrutinized at that level and brought to the Board of Supervisors level, where you could ultimately have a series of public hearings, one before the zoning commission, 3 before the Board of Supervisors, to engage in the appropriateness of that area by looking at a site plan, etc. If that process could be considered in conjunction with a conditional use, for example, let's say something meets the requirements of what is generated based on the requirements. We don't have those listed, but let's just say an area gets rezoned to the overlay district, then the application would have to go through the conditional use process back to the zoning commission and to the Board of Adjustment. Any type of respective proposal can have items instituted in them, such as decommissioning plans, grading plans, road use agreement plans, etc. So those items could definitely be considered. Where I have the item up there, added ordinance requirements, an added ordinance would be added features to what is on the books. So the next topic to look at is information collection. What is it that we need to know about the project? We would need to collect this information entirely to understand whether an overlay district is appropriate or not. We would need to know it for the respective conditional use permit proceedings. Certified abstract or listing, it's a common document that we use to certify who all the official landowners are within a respective area. I put that up there because we take that very serious through any application. We actually have an abstracting company certify that the people that live within an area are the landowners within that area, so that they are duly notified about the respective applications that go through. That's something we'll likely always require of our applicants, as we do with our ordinance. General information, what is the scope of the project? I think that's something that we all must know, we want to know is what is it? What type of system? What are the specs? What are the sizes? What is the imprint? How is it going to affect the property? Basically from every angle. The mapping specifically, the documentation, the accessory documents, the expectation that they are interacting with the other governments, the other agencies, the other landowners. We know that the FAA, the flight path, the planes in the air, that's very important. That definitely came up when we did one a couple years back as a direct conditional use. And so there's lots of information that we as a public need to know in order to process the information to see whether it's appropriate or not. So I'll move to the next topic, which is the requirements. What kind of things can we definitely talk about as far as items that go into an ordinance that the county may desire to regulate? A big one that we talk about a lot are separation distances or setbacks. How far is the appropriate amount to be from another residence, an airport, a school, etc. Fencing and security requirements. What can be regulated to protect the safety of everyone involved, to protect the property itself and keep people from entering a property and endangering themselves. We can look at regulating signage on the property, lighting, noise, glare. We need to know the relationship with the utilities, the utility connections. The accessory structures. What is the framework of the property directly going to look like? Are there going to be accessory structures, other lines? Are there going to be storage units, etc., located across the property? Endangered species, wetlands. There's various groups out there, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Iowa DNR, that have a compelling interest in a lot of these items. So those items can definitely be parts of ordinances, and we've definitely seen them as parts of ordinances doing the research. Weed control. The county definitely has a weed commissioner, and there's noxious weeds and problems that, of course, can happen as part of weed control. Those are definitely common references that can be a part of an ordinance. As we talked about the slope level, where we got direction, soil content. As we know, there's different soils out there that may be more appropriate than others for development, and the slope content can definitely be something that can be respected and considered. Maintenance, those items that are placed out there. What are the county's expectations that they maintain them, keep them appropriate, they repair them or replace them? What are the policies as far as replacing them? What happens ultimately if the operation ends? It's over with. Well, we have to look at decommissioning, having the county sign up in the front, in the very beginning, with expectations or signing bond agreements, etc., that the money is there, that there is a procedure or a protocol to return the property back to the best of the ability in which it is found. There are some ordinances out there, including Lynn County, that have an agricultural restoration plan that the applicant has to agree to bring the ag back to the appropriate condition. So the decommissioning would be a huge part of possibly any proposal that comes about. The repowering, what happens if a percentage of them are out of commission? Do we put a percentage in there to go back through the process, the conditional use process to restore something to what it was previously permitted? We all know that our roads are very important, and we like to see our roads kept in the best shape, and road use agreements are something that can definitely be put in there to ensure that not only the construction of the project, but the long-term use ensures that our roads are protected. Woodbury County also has a sizable floodplain. We can look at this from a floodplain approach too, and sediment control. We can look at obviously our floodplain regulations require flood proofing and protection of any assets of a major value, but that's something that can be regulated. Stormwater management, ensuring that there's available stormwater pollution prevention plans, that the property in which the construction is happening, that the neighbors are protected from any aspects of runoff or as well. And oftentimes the Zoning Commission and Board of Adjustment put into their regulations, they expect compliance with federal and state, and local, and various other regulations. And by virtue of doing a conditional use, we try to check on that as thoroughly as possible to ensure that these applicants are not only meeting the expectations of Woodbury County and the residents of Woodbury County, but they're meeting the requirements of the state and the national government. We'll have to talk about items such as transfer, selling it, the continuation, if ground gets sold, etc. Also, the administration and enforcement. What will be the enforcement regulations as it comes to problems that are out there that can be identified, notified, and ultimately what would the long-term solution be in that realm? And yes, fees, fee structure. Woodbury County has a fee structure. We call it the fee schedule that is approved by the Board of Supervisors from time to time. It's definitely imperative to look at what other jurisdictions are charging for these type of products. And also what are other concerns? And that's what I'm pretty sure we're all fully probably on the same page in terms of relying on the public to help assist us in understanding what the ramifications or consequences could be, the positives or the negatives as far as these respective projects. Kind of shift into the next topic, topic 7. Many ordinances have numerous definitions in terms of what these items actually are, whether we're defining what a solar array is, whether we're defining what glare is. From a legal perspective, we have to have a direct definition on which these items are in order to regulate. So I've just put a sampling of different definitions in the packets, backup materials for the agenda, which are up here. And so really at this time, I would have to say, kind of talking with the commission, that we've definitely got items to look at. We've got a lot of information. And to me, this is your typical funnel effect where you have all this information going into the funnel. How do we run it through and kind of purify the information and take it into a way that finds an appropriate balance as far as an ordinance in terms of regulating this? Obviously, it's a subject where there's major concerns, and there's going to be folks that 100% support it, and there's going to be folks that oppose it. And so kind of the key is balance, and that's where we have zoning districts to consider. Opposing something is probably being a proponent of saying it's not appropriate in this zoning district or that zoning district, or considering the overlay could be a possibility as far as looking at having an opportunity to put it in a particular area, but offering a dual level of scrutiny if the overlay is considered. And I would say that kind of in the process moving forward, we would continue to look at this, collect comments, and probably have a work session at some point where the commission, if I'd recommend, have a meeting together it's a public meeting, because the commissioners work in public, but it's much more geared at looking directly at many of these concepts and these definitions so that we can publicly come to a proposal that is, again, a recommendation. The goal is to recommend something based on good information that we can come up with to see whether it's appropriate or not in agricultural land. I will have to reiterate that our conditional use permit process is currently there on the books. And doing the ordinance amendment is an added feature to that conditional use. So what that means is, as new information comes in, the commission can look within their criteria if something is not enumerated. So the key is to have flexibility on items that come in. It's kind of the balance between enumeration. And I know this has come up previously in the debate on whether you have something directly enumerated in words. Obviously you follow that, and that's what the expectation is. The conditional use has the ability to still grant that flexibility, but with enumeration. And what I mean by that is, tonight you saw the commission did have the telecommunication tower. We have telecommunication towers in the ordinance that are required under a conditional use. They have to meet a site plan. They have to meet setbacks. And when they meet those standards, those are directly enumerated separately in the ordinance, but they also coincide with the conditional use. So if we were to learn more, or there was major concerns at the staff level or the condition or the commission level, there's the ability to look at the flexibility inside of the conditional use on identifying potential issues, but also having the enumeration in there right now. Traditionally, without an ordinance, if we were to get a permit tomorrow and it were to go into general industrial and the zoning commission and the board of adjustment were to consider it, the zoning commission has the authority to look through many of these concepts that are brought up before you here in topic 6. And the zoning commission has the ability to recommend security. They have the ability to recommend lighting or screening or trees or specific things through the condition. So that ability is there, at least within the industrial side of things right now, presently at this point. So any future ordinance could be sort of a branch. If, for example, if you use the overlay that I kind of referenced, if you get an application that comes in, you could have an ordinance in place that directly addresses many of these concepts. But if the application comes from the general industrial zoning district, then you would operate under the ordinance through the conditional use and the added features of the ordinance. The zoning commission, the board of adjustment can consider it and go through that process. But if somebody were to come in and ask for one on agricultural land, then that's where the overlay district could kick in, where then you have to go through the zoning commission and the board of supervisors before you could even get to the conditional use level. So a two-pronged approach could be a possibility in theory. So I just want to bring that out, that there are several tools and abilities to try to look at addressing this, as far as bringing it down to more of a micro scale on looking at the specific property in question at the using an overlay district versus using the entire district. And I think that's where we came to this point when this proposal started with putting a conditional use C in the blanket agricultural preservation. When you do that, that means you bring the application directly to the zoning commission, board of adjustment. They consider the area under the realm of the conditional use. But if you institute an overlay district, what that does is it limits agricultural preservation to the area that's in question. The overlay district, you could actually consider instituting the cap that the supervisors kind of pointed out. You could consider the slope. You could consider the density, the separation distances, et cetera, centric to the agricultural land. So kind of looking at those different aspects, those are things that we can kind of run through the funnel and see generally what could be appropriate or not. But that's all I've got at this point.
So it's commissioners' concerns at this point in time. So commissioners, do you have any comments or questions?
There's a lot. I believe there's lots of information I need before I can make a good decision. I would consider a work study meeting to look at some things. Would that be appropriate?
Absolutely.
I would also welcome a session.
Anyone else at this time? Comments, concerns, points of view?
I guess I'm along with them on their, the work session issue. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed throughout the different points and the things that have been brought up at the meeting or the 2 meetings we've had.
I'm going to jump in with just a quick question. Help me understand the overlay. You talk about rezoning. Is it rezoning? Then once that use goes away as an additional use and the zoning goes to,
Yeah.
for example, AP, which is what we're talking about. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. And I hope, if you had any questions, you guys know that too.
Yeah. Yes, the zoning ordinance presently has a process for the creation of an overlay district, in particular, a conservation district. It is possible to create an overlay district that uses the same exact rezoning procedure that could be defined. So for example, in the past, typically the rezones that come through the county are to rezone from an agricultural preservation to an agricultural estates. It usually is for the purpose of building houses, having more density in a particular area. It is possible to look at creating a district called an overlay that sits over top and floats, where you have all the existing land use already available remain there. And what the overlay district does is it creates a new set of uses. However, it's decided to define the overlay district. So you could, for example, call an overlay district a utility scale overlay district, which authorizes utility scale in there. But in order to do that, you use the same process where the commission looks at recommending a overlay zone to the supervisors, and then the supervisors would consider that. Another example of an overlay district is the floodplain. We have the floodplain, it crosses the county, and there's areas within the floodplain that are 100-year floodplain, the zone A, the zone approximate, which means that there's not a base flood elevation level calculated. The floodplain sits out there across the county, and it's basically an overlay, and it means that there's a different level of regulation on that property, even though it's still agricultural preservation. So for example, we'll take a farm ground and we'll put a floodplain overlay on there. We're very well informed of what the agricultural exemption is, but state code requires that the floodplain be regulated. And so farmers are subject to the same floodplain regulations as everybody else. And so they have to follow that. So we have 2 districts that coexist in the same area that have a level of expectation. If you're to create an overlay district, you're not painting a district across the county. What you're doing is you're putting a district in the hopper. And what that means is if there's a request to use that district, the district is created on an application basis. So somebody comes in and they ask to rezone to this overlay district. What happens is it's considered for the footprint of that respective property. And so by looking at that, we know right now that CSR is a factor when we look at rezoning a property. It is a factor. The zoning commission, board of supervisors have the ability to define what that process is in order to create the overlay district. So they have an opportunity to look at CSR, they have an opportunity to look at slope, to look at all the characteristics available in order to flip it over to that district. So it's a matter of creating what those requirements are if the overlay is considered. And so we technically right now have the ability, if somebody wanted to deem an area in the agricultural preservation district to be a new conservation area, we can create a conservation overlay district and have specific requirements for that conservation district, whether it be a set of uses, a set of setbacks, et cetera. It's a way of kind of customizing within the ordinance in a sense of having two areas that can be with one another. Now, an ordinance can be written in a way to look at the area through the overlay process and decide if that area is appropriate or not for the overlay district. If it comes out that it's not, it could potentially be written in the ordinance to have criteria that must be met. If it's not met, then the overlay district can't happen. So yeah, you have to look at the balance and the uniqueness of what it is that what we learn from the public, what we learn from other ordinances, other jurisdictions on what's key to protect, what's key as far as granting that ordinance. We also have the ability in the ordinance to do other things like plan developments where you create a new set of standards that might be different than agricultural preservation, agricultural estates. And so we do have that ability in our section that defines the ordinances, the zoning districts. We have agricultural preservation all the way up through the conservation overlay district. And I'm actually going to show you, I'll go ahead and hopefully the internet works here. I'll pull up the zoning ordinance. Just real quick here and show you this conservation overlay district. So if we go to the Woodbury County website, go to departments, go down to community and economic development, we have this ordinance button. So you want to click there and the zoning ordinance is the first option. And if we zoom down through the ordinance here, it'll start defining our zoning districts. Okay. You'll see right here, this one references conservation development right here where it says the Board of Supervisors may amend the zoning district map to provide for a conservation development overlay zone pursuant to the procedures set out. And basically going through this process, the conservation development district goes through the rezone process that the commission will do once in a while along with the Board of Supervisors. So there is the ability to create this conservation overlay district. And what I'm pointing out is counties such as like a Scott or a Lynn do the overlay where they create something on top that is created later on for a specific use by looking at the area. Now, there's more to show you here. If we get to the zoning district section, okay, Article 3, Section 3 shows you what the basic level of an agricultural preservation zoning district is. But if we scroll down here to, there's the plan development. This is a plan development overlay district. Again, that would be a district you put over top of an existing district, a plan development. Now, the one I've been referring to is the conservation development overlay district. Again, this district sits on top of whichever base zoning district that you tie it to. And what I'm saying is there's a possibility to create another one of these overlays and call it the renewable energy or the utility solar overlay district. And then the district would have a purpose. It would have allowed uses. You'll notice right here, it says allowed uses. The specific land uses allowed is principal allowed, conditional allowed, accessory allowed, and the underlying zoning district are also allowed in this district. So what you're saying is you're instituting a district that floats on top. Now, for example, and hypothetically, if an applicant comes in and let's just say they magically get the district switched to an overlay utility district, it goes through the process with conditions, conditional use, et cetera. Plans can be instituted inside of the decommissioning. If you have a robust decommissioning, that the district, in a sense, the overlay would, in a sense, go away or would not be part of that if that use expires. And so based upon the decommissioning, you are ultimately remove the solar park, and now you're still in the agricultural preservation zoning district. You have all the rights of the zoning, agricultural preservation zoning district. Looking at it from this perspective prevents the concept of rezoning to an industrial district, thereby changing the legacy of farming or what's happening out there. So an overlay district does not threaten the base district as far as the continued use beyond what the solar is. If the solar park goes away through how an ordinance is written as far as the decommissioning, or it's not maintained in some way, it can be controlled in there that stuff goes away and it can return back to the goal of what it originally was, depending again on how the ordinance is written. So again, that's what I'm associating with when I look at this in comparison to your Scott County or your Lynn County as far as using an overlay. So.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had too, and I just wanted to make sure this was pointed out and it's clear, is that for all the different applications for the ordinance, we have different processes. So when you're talking about the overlay process and conditional use process, the Board of Adjustment, the Commission, the Board of Supervisors, are all three included in any type of application?
Yes, absolutely. If in theory you looked at doing an overlay, the application would come to staff. We would expect a site plan to let us know the scope of everything, I would say, from a proposal standpoint. It would go to the zoning commission for a recommendation based on the available criteria at hand. And depending on what comes out of it, that recommendation would go to the Board of Supervisors, and the Board of Supervisors could decide on the overlay like they would now for a planned development or a conservation district. That would be in their hands. In terms of looking at the full scope of things, if you're doing a decommissioning plan, there's some things that the Board of Supervisors technically should be in charge of and must do on behalf of the county, and that would be executing agreements. So if they're going to task them to do decommissioning plans, road use agreements, even an agricultural restoration plan or things associated with, that would be tied in likely directly with the supervisors. And so now doing the conditional use on the other layer, the zoning commission would also be involved, not only in the zoning district, but they would be involved in the conditional use permit process and run it through that procedure and then get to the Board of Adjustment like we do with the normal permitting of a conditional use. So ultimately the commission would recommend to the supervisors and they would recommend to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment would be involved in it as far as the approval of the ultimate permit. So in a way, it's like getting the permission of the Board of Supervisors for the appropriateness of the area through the rezone, And then once they get approval and they see that these need these respective plans and everything, then Board of Adjustment could ultimately, in theory, depending on how it's written, make the decision ultimately on the permit. But so it's kind of like, is this area appropriate? If it is, there could be multiple checks and balances in this project because of the fact that you have public hearing at the zoning commission, you have 3 at the supervisor level, then you go back to the zoning commission for review, then you have it at the Board of Adjustment level, and it would all be kind of cross-pattern information sharing where there would be expectations on all sides. And the applicant, through some of these processes, would basically want to start out very clear. And that would be the expectation of writing any ordinance is, what do I have to meet to get this approved for this respective area? And so to me, it can be multi-pronged, because right now, and if this is something that the board would want to look at, is it's allowed in general industrial right now presently for consideration. So if general industrial is currently appropriate, then maybe you don't do the overlay. As far as it's already in that district, then you just proceed to the conditional use process directly, but you still want the agreements in there with the supervisors. You would have to bring a decommissioning plan and all the things that they would need to approve. So I think the potential is there in theory to involve all the permitting entities of the county.
Okay. And I think that part of what I'm interested in is that there's so many public meetings involved in that avenue that it does give people to speak to the occasion, you know, voice their opinion. Anybody else have any comments or thoughts on?
Just the other question I had was, even though the overlay district is approved, doesn't necessarily mean the conditional use permit would be allowed from the Board of Adjustment either. It's not a guarantee. It's just another layer, another step that's added in there.
Again, this is in theory because we don't have a proposal, so it entirely depends on how it's written. So there would definitely be, each permit has criteria, and you can meet a criteria for a rezone, but maybe you don't meet criteria for another area. So potentially there's a possibility to get one approved and the other one not approved. And that's something I think that would have to be a part of any discussion or work session to see. Without a proposal, it's definitely a hypothetical.
Okay, where do we go from here?
Close the public hearing.
Okay, we're gonna make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion to close. Do we have a second?
I will second.
We have, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries unanimously, I think. Sure. You can do that. No?
It's up to you.
Well, you got 3 minutes?
If you're willing to.
We have
share.
3 minutes, yes.
Hi, my name is Daniel Segura. I live in Sioux City. I have family and friends that have property in sort of the subject areas in this county. I just wanted to make a comment about this discussion about overlay and pairing that with the conditional use permit or maybe a variance or something of that nature. I don't see how this necessarily addresses the concerns of those that are, as we would say, against the motion to institute a statute promoting the solar panels. One thing that I'm seeing is we already have, just by virtue of the statutes and ordinances in this county, a method to do something like that, and that's the regular conditional use permit way of applying and getting a variance, that sort of thing. What it seems like is this overlay might just be more of a sort of like a soft approval of this category of solar panels, solar energy, what have you. And then it kind of sort of boosts it into being approved once it gets kicked down to the next. So I don't see it as an extra protection for, to basically give those that are opposed to this motion sort of like, oh, this is going to help the process, like an extra check. It doesn't seem to be that way. One thing that I wanted to mention just about the conditional use permits, those we can't take those away. Those are always permitted. That will, someone can always apply for a conditional use permit or a variance. And it seems that those would be a good way to, if someone had a specific and sort of a unique need for solar panels on their property or solar energy. One clear example would be something like a medical clinic that's kind of out in the country and they need backup power. And I don't think anyone would be opposed to considering, okay, this is a special example, special scenario where a conditional use permit or a variance, it would seem reasonable that these people have a particular need for something that's unusual. But the concerns that most people are having, those that are wanting to retain the farming jurisdiction and the zoning of farming, is that that if we open the door to everyone getting something, then people will continue to get it. We wouldn't say that we could allow variances and conditional use permits for every person, for example, like we've heard, that wanted to farm in the city. We would say, well, only if you had a specific need for that, if there was something out of the ordinary. So that's what I would just add to comment to some of this new talk of overlay and conditional use permits.
Thank you.
I don't know either.
Absolutely.
Call come in. It wasn't a number I recognized. I let it just go. And then my phone said maybe it was a new number for Andrew. So I tried calling him back. And then I heard a phone ringing. I didn't answer. And and then the next thing I know, I hear it ringing again, and it says it's you. So I don't know what happened. But anyway, I'm actually still listening to my meeting. Can I call you later?
Oh,
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
should have been on mute. In response to again, we're at a kind of a hypothetical stage, but there is the opportunity in the overlay district to have specific matrix or standards as far as even on the spirit of in our direction, whether it's CSR, whether it's slope, or whether it's specific criteria. Again, a rezone is looking at the appropriateness of that area going into that zone. So it's looking at what are the requirements, and those requirements can be instituted in there as far as to me, again, the criteria that the supervisors have kind of put forward, those type of things could be built into the consideration of appropriateness of the area. So that's definitely a possibility.
Oh, that's weird. So
Commission, questions or comments? Sounds like. Okay. So hearing that, I'll call for the motion to adjourn. What else are we at? Oh, I'm sorry. Public comments on matters not on the agenda. Sarla, I'm going off agenda here. Public comment, matters not on the agenda. Seeing and hearing none, we're going to move on to commissioner comments or inquiries. I'm hearing none on that as well. And moving on to staff update.
Yes, next week, the Board of Adjustment will be meeting actually down in this room again. The Board of Adjustment does not hold a role in deciding of new ordinances. It's a duty that the Zoning Commission has to make a recommendation over to the Board of Supervisors. But we always try to share that information so that the Board of Adjustment has knowledge of what's happening on, with the zoning commission as well as the Board of Supervisors. So there will be a solar information item, again, information item, meaning that they will look at and listen to information about what we're talking about here tonight, as well as what the board is talking about. So I just want you to be aware of that. And of course, the zoning commission recommendation on the telecommunication tower, they will take that up as well. So
When is that?
that will be a week from tonight on the 2nd at, they meet at 6:00 PM still. So that's all I've got.
Okay. Call for a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion to adjourn is unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Appreciate your